Hi everyone, this is Starpath Academy story time, and this is a part of the series of members' questions answered. So on my Patreon account and on my buymeacoffee.com/Starpath Academy account, members are allowed to ask questions and I do my best to answer them, and we vote on some of these questions. And in this video I will be discussing the topic of pets during hyperinflation in Romania during the 90s, my perspective. I love these questions and comments from members because it really shows the human perspective that you guys are interested in. It's such a humane topic to talk about this, and you know, I'm really happy to do these videos for you guys. Some of these videos of course won't be all all in a lot of fun. These were some hard times, and well, you'll see what I'm talking about. So just to be clear, the only pets that we had was a goldfish and a turtle, a tiny turtle, that I only had for one weekend. However, my friends and family did have dogs and cats, especially the ones who were living outside of town, the rural areas. And a lot of people had pets in the cities as well, but not even near to the percentage of how many pets or how many families have pets today in the cities. So we were a communist country, and a lot of people were moving in, or I should say moved in, sometimes forcefully moved into the big cities as workforce for labor, for factories and some other stuff, as the economy was being increased by government. And in the cities, in these apartment buildings, of course, something like it was called something that you would think of as an HOA, right? As these would be administrație or something like that, which is basically these communist buildings were called blocks. Usually somewhere around 40 to 80 families lived in these concrete buildings, and based on what the HOA, let's just name it HOA, would vote on, you could or you may not have some pets, and most of them did not allow pets, right? And these were very small apartments in concrete buildings, and yeah, a lot of people just didn't have pets. Now of course some people had pets even though the HOA didn't allow it, and like cats, maybe if they didn't know about. Dogs were a bit harder to keep, right? But generally speaking, we didn't have a lot of pets. That's the main idea to take away. However, during hyperinflation, right, because of the hardships that came with it, people were, even the ones that had pets, it was getting harder and harder to keep the pets. And even before that, it wasn't like how it is today, that you go in a store and you see a lot of pet food on the shelf and you can choose, or you can buy bags of pet foods or something like that. we had 10 years of austerity measures, and during these times it was very limited production, and a lot of was made for export, even for ourselves. So food was sometimes even scarce before hyperinflation. People were feeding homemade pet food or food scraps to their animals. And of course, the ones who lived in towns, or outside towns in the country, that they of course had an easier way to keep pets. So most of the pets were there anyway. Now when food was even more scarce, and it took much more of your salary to buy food for yourself and your own family, a lot of people just let their pets go in the cities. Some drove out of the city and let their cats or dogs out there, but as fuel was scarce and not many people had vehicles to begin with, or sometimes people would carpool with other families, right? And it was harder to go outside of town and leave it there, so people just went into a park and left their cats there, or dogs. And nature works in mysterious ways. Once these pets were kind of left there, it was amazing to see how fast they adapt back to nature. Their furs grow out. They even change colors to some degree. And especially the dogs, it was you could see that they would look different, not groomed or anything like that. And some of their furs even changed to a color. I think it was more like a reddish, brownish color that most of the dogs had. And that was just the first generation, right? This went on for around 7 years, and even then, these dogs, as they had offspring, and more different breeds of dogs were mixing together, you would see some patterns evolving, and you could see very interesting new species of dogs coming together right on the street or in near the parks. And they survived. Most of them survived because they lived near trash cans, and we had these big, huge, open containers, steel containers for trash between apartment buildings. Normally what would happen is that these apartment buildings would have a trash chute inside the building where people would throw their trash down, right? And then it would fall into a container, and then the sanitary or the people from the trash companies, or usually it was during communism, it was a government thing. They would come and take and swap out the bins, of course. But what would happen during hyperinflation, that these services sort of broke down for weeks or months even. What people did was they tried to put these huge metal trash cans, or trash containers, I should say. They had open tops, and then they were just throwing trash in there. The people did their best to kind of keep it clean, but you can imagine like some of these trash cans open, and with the smell and everything else, and food scraps and such things. So cats and dogs would usually live around these big trash cans, to the degree that as these new generations, especially of dogs, were being born, they never had the loving care of a human being. So they were wild, essentially. Like, think about coyotes or something like that, right? And like the elderly people actually had, or kids had trouble using these bins because a lot of the dogs were around that area, and they would attack people. And cats were a bit different, of course, but these dogs were living near those trash cans and those areas. So sometimes two people would go in order to throw the trash away, because in order not to be attacked by packs of dogs. Packs of dogs. It wasn't just one or two. And if you're coming from Romania or Eastern Europe and you have experienced this, you know it's totally different than when it's one dog or if it's a pack of dogs. Their psychology is completely different. And when there was around 4 dogs, I think, you could scare them off, especially if you knew what you were doing. It was easier to scare 4 or 5 dogs. But sometimes the packs were big, especially during nighttime. These dog packs were as big as 10 to 14 dogs, not more than that, because I guess they would have like social, alpha dog and whatever circles there, so they would break up into multiple groups, I guess, if they were bigger. But I have seen definitely 10 to 14 dogs together just running down the street during midnight or nighttime. And actually they weren't making a lot of noise. They were smart about not making too much noise. They were going from bush to bush to from behind the corner, from an alley to another alley, and so on. And they would go into an alley, and you would think like, what's happening, and there was like 7 dogs running into an alley where the trash can was. So definitely, you had to take out the trash during the daytime, because you could get attacked. And of course they were not vaccinated or taken care of, so rabies or something like that was pretty common. And you would have to be taken immediately to the hospital after a dog bite. But I told you about hospitals and how crowded they were, so it was even more dangerous during those times to be bitten. Now, people had different strategies to fend off from dogs, with sticks and that sort of stuff. If you ever did that in your life, you know that one stick is not enough, because like a good dog can grab the stick right out of your hand. So the technique was to have 2 sticks, actually. One had to use as a bait, and they would chomp on that one, and then you could use the other one to kind of fend off the dogs. So that would work, but usually just scaring them off was the best, or not going close to them. And of course the other thing that people did was, and I remember me doing this as well, that I had to carry rocks in my pockets. So when the sun went down and we were hanging out, quote unquote, on the street with fellow young people, and still talking about social issues and other stuff, I mean, even during hyperinflation, people were hanging out sometimes, and courting girls and so on. So these things happen. But during the nighttime, you had to carry a couple of rocks in both of your pockets, and the way how this worked was actually throwing rocks near them would scare them off, and because they don't necessarily have a mechanism to how to fend off flying objects. So that was the best thing. But if you didn't have any rocks with you, then what usually worked was you squatting. And their dogs would run for you. Like, they would get excited that they're gonna take you down, and they would run towards you. And when they got really close, they had to get close, and then you would jump up in the air with your hands above and make a big sound as much as you could. But you had to let them come in and you would jump up and scare them off. And I'm not sure why, or maybe if you guys know more about dogs, you can tell me, but this would work most of the time. This would work, and you could scare many dogs, like if they were running towards you. So if you didn't have rocks and you didn't have two sticks to fend off, then that's what you could do, you know. And of course we can get into the darker side of things. I will try to keep this video family friendly, but a lot of people just had enough, and the city didn't have resources to take care of dogs or anything like that on the street. So people did their own they came up with their own ways how to kind of control the population. And you can think up of everything and anything here, and people tried it, and still there was a lot of dogs. Even then, a lot of dogs. Of course, one thing that was done was using poison, rat poison or something like that people did. And I remember my father being really angry about that happening. He was very passionate about dogs, and more so than anyone else in my family. He really, for some reason, that would really hurt him if he would see someone else for no reason being aggressive with dogs. So that was my father. He really liked dogs, and but you couldn't feed them because more would come, you know. So we were not feeding them, because if you would feed them on the street, they would get accommodated to that, and more dogs would show up. But the most we could do is you know, try, if we would see traps or something like that, we would try to find out who was placed the poison or something like that, and get rid of it and try to make a scene out of it, because, you know, we cared about animals. But and there were some even more aggressive ways. I don't know why people did this, but they hanged them. I have no idea how or why or who thought that was a good idea. But, you know, you could go to a playground, and on a tree you would see a hanged dog, and I don't know why it just happened. And I remember my father crying when he saw that. So yeah, and this even happened in out in the country for some reason. I don't know if this is supposed to be a sign, or I'm not sure, but actually someone came on our property, on my aunt's property. It was a longer property. At the very end she had trees and bushes, and some, I guess, neighbor or someone from another you know, population center was came over, and he hanged his dog over there. I don't know why. It was, again, my father had to deal with that, and he was so broken. One thing that people tried was hanging cats, and I know this video is probably not turning out how some of you know, are thinking, but I'm here to tell you what happened, right? And then we can learn from these, you know, experiences. But turns out you cannot hang a cat, so so we would find hanged cats that were still alive, you know, because I guess their neck muscles or whatever, they would just be there. And that was probably the cruelest, because like, why would you leave it there? I don't know. And then we would come and cut the rope. Yeah, it was horrible. It was just horrible. But the most common way was rat poison in food, and that's what people did when they got fed up with the situation. But it was, I mean, it was just the city or the administration or the government's not having enough money or assets or whatever you need to take care of the situation. And this went on for a long period. I don't know why, because even afterwards, like when hyperinflation quote unquote ended, it kind of tapered off really. It went into just regular high inflation of 30% or something like that. Even then, a lot of dogs were roaming the street at night. So like years after hyperinflation, at least the city that I lived. And I know Bucharest had big issues as well. So that's the capital city of Romania. And we read stories about even bigger packs of dogs attacking children and old women on the street. And they had even bigger issues than the city that we lived in. And even way after hyperinflation. So I don't know why they didn't handle this situation. On a more positive note, a lot of people like who were friendly towards dogs tried to adopt them, and that means that the folk from the countryside who had bigger pieces of land, a couple of acres or something, they would sometimes come into the city where maybe some of their relatives told them about this dog or dogs or something like that, and they would try to catch them and adopt them. And it worked out. Sometimes it worked out even after a couple of generations of new dogs. They were still friendly towards people who not all of them, but some of the dogs, right, who were trying to adopt them. And they took them off, and I remember knowing a couple of cases of this. And it was a bit different because these dogs, when they were adopted, the grown dogs, they were very hard to train, or you couldn't train them at all, but they were good for security. So they would become very loyal, from what I heard, very loyal to the place that they were brought in. And they would not be, of course, good for herding animals or that sort of stuff, but they were very protective of the environment. And people in the countryside would be able to feed them with food scraps and kind of improvised dog food that they made from animal parts and some other stuff. But of course you need to know, if you're giving food scraps, what you're not supposed to give, like chicken bones or something like that, because those things can be dangerous for them. Right. And my aunt had a dog. My grandmother's sister had a dog, and the dog name was Bodri. and when we were in the countryside, my grandmother's place was a couple of houses down the street. So when we were eating, we would make sure that we have enough food scraps, and my sister and I would sometimes walk on the rocky street, well, sometimes barefoot, down to my aunt's house, and give food scraps to the dog. And he was really enjoying that. And the dog was for providing safety for the hens, for the chickens, and he was a really good dog. And then eventually she had a new dog, and so on. So she always had some dogs for fending off, I guess, predators from chickens and so on. And yes, so I think I think you kind of got the idea with dogs, what kind of happened. It really depended on how lucky they were, or how lucky the humans were in the specific areas. For cats, it was a different thing, because of course cats didn't bother people that much, because they would run and hide, and only during the nighttime they would come out. But a lot of, especially the older ladies, would provide food for them as much as they could, and you would see like the cats, you know, maybe again 8 to 15 cats in a place, you know, and somebody from these apartment buildings bringing down milk or whatever. So there was a lot of people who tried to care for them, but there was also very sad reality to the whole thing. So that's in a nutshell. Of course, if you have questions, you know, I'm more than happy to answer them, but that was the situation. So there you go. I hope to see you in the next video.